Here I come.
If we take a screen capture on my deadlift, you can see the difference in curvature at the start of the deadlift and right before I failed my deadlift. You can see some amount of rounding happened from the start to the end of the deadlift. This is called spinal flexion.
Spinal.
As a reference, this is spinal flexion and this is spinal extension. Well, I do understand that there are some lifts, for example, lifting Atlas stone, that will be performed with a rounded back. It's impossible to actually do an Atlas stone with a straight, flat back. That is not efficient at all for the purpose of the lift. There's also another example when someone is doing deadlift intentionally with a rounded back, with a rounded upper back like this, so that he can reduce the moment arm from the hip to the shoulder. But for this instance, what we are discussing is not this kind of advanced level technique for a deadlift where someone is intentionally reducing the moment arm. I'm talking about when someone is trying to set their back flat at the start of the deadlift or a squat and ending up with a rounded back. So this kind of flexion happens during the lift itself. The first question that people might ask is whether this is safe to do. Is it going to produce high amount of risk of injury? And to be very honest, my answer is I don't know. I do observe a lot of different kind of lifters, people who lift with a very flat back during deadlift and squat, but still they can have a back injury, a back tweak. But there are also people rounding their back, lifting the weight with poor form, but they never have any kind of issues with their back. So I think there are multiple factors that plays a part in terms of injury. Can I just not care about my back extension when I'm doing a squat or a deadlift? And I think the answer is still no. When you start with a flat back and becomes rounded as you go along, there are some mechanical inefficiency that happens along the way. Let's use this book as a model of demonstration. This book represents your spine. This point over here is your hip, and this point over here is your shoulder. When we are squatting, we are going to put a load on top of our back. If it's a deadlift, of course, the weight will be hanging on our arms and being transferred to the shoulder. Now, I am going to exert some amount of force from the hip. Of course, the book is slightly flexible, so in this case, when I'm trying to exert the force from the hip, actually, the book is bending. And the same goes with our spine if we are not able to maintain enough rigidity on our back. Now, if we want to lift this weight up on our back, we need to make sure that our back is as rigid as possible. I'm doing this by twisting the book a little bit, and the moment I start to pull up, the weight is also lifting up. From the demonstration earlier, we can see when the book is not fully rigid, some amount of the force we exert towards the book creates some amount of bending in the segment. In a lift, for example, a deadlift, sometimes we do see people bending their back, but the weight still can go up. So in this case, what happened? It means that there's still sufficient amount of forces transferred towards the load itself, enough for it to come up. But at the same time, the amount of forces that is transferred is not 100%. Some amount of forces actually create some amount of bending on the segment of the back itself. For maximum efficiency, we want it to be rigid all the time. The moment you produce the force exerted towards the floor, we want every single amount of Newton to be transferred to the load. Remember, we are not able to produce force infinitely. especially at the maximum peak force, we are only having a very short period of time to continue producing that amount of force. I hope this video has been able to explain to you why keeping our back rigid and extended is very important for your lift. I hope to see you on the next video. Goodbye.